He walked into her cafe as a stranger, but one simple act of kindness would reveal a secret that would change both their lives forever. The morning air was cool when Ethan Cole stepped out of his black car, wearing a plain gray hoodie, old jeans, and glasses that didn't suit him. Nobody would have guessed that this man was one of the richest people in the country, founder of a global tech company known for changing how people lived. But today he wasn't Ethan Cole the billionaire. Today he was just Eli. An ordinary man visiting an ordinary cafe. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the small shop in front of him. The sign above the door said Maple Street Café in faded paint, and the windows were covered with drawings and little messages from customers. It didn't look like much, but something about the place felt warm. The smell of coffee drifted out as the door opened for a customer. Ethan found himself smiling a little without meaning to. He had bought this cafe 2 months ago. It's through his company's real estate branch. It was just another small property added to a long list of investments, and on paper, it didn't seem like a good one. The cafe barely made enough money to stay open. His managers had already suggested closing it and turning the building into a parking lot or renting it to a new business. Normally, Ethan would have just signed the papers and moved on. But something about this one cafe made him pause. It wasn't the numbers, it was the letters. When he had seen the report about the cafe, there were handwritten notes attached from local customers, people asking the company not to close it down. They wrote about how much it meant to the neighborhood, how it was a meeting place for lonely seniors, students, and families. One message simply said, "This cafe is where I feel seen." That line had stayed in Ethan's head for days. He didn't know why. Maybe because he hadn't felt truly seen in a long time either. So now, here he was, standing in front of the place he technically owned. But no one inside knew that. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, not as a businessman, but as a person. He pushed the door open and walked in quietly. The soft bell above the door jingled. Inside, the cafe felt different from any fancy place he'd been to. The furniture didn't match. The chairs were worn, and the walls were filled with old photos of customers smiling with mugs in their hands. There was laughter coming from a corner table where 2 old men were playing cards. Someone was singing softly behind the counter as the coffee machine hissed. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Ethan found a seat near the window. He didn't want to attract attention. He was just another customer, after all. A few moments later, he heard a gentle voice behind him say, "Good morning. You're new here, right?" He turned and saw her, the waitress. She was wearing a simple apron and had her hair tied back in a messy bun. But her smile was brighter than the sunlight coming through the window. Her name tag said Lena. She held a small notepad and looked at him with friendly curiosity. "Yeah," Ethan said, pretending to adjust his glasses. "First time here. Smells nice, though," Lena laughed softly. "That's the best compliment we could get around here. Coffee or breakfast?" "Just coffee for now," he said. "All right. We don't serve customers here. We serve people," she said cheerfully, before walking to the counter. Ethan froze. "We don't serve customers, we serve people." Those words hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because in his world, people only talked about clients, users, and profit margins. Nobody talked about people anymore. He watched her as she worked, greeting everyone by name. Remembering who liked extra sugar, who wanted their toast slightly burnt, who needed a quiet seat. She moved with purpose, but also kindness. When she delivered his coffee, she placed it down carefully and said, "Careful. It's hot, but it's made with love." Then she smiled and walked away to help another customer. Ethan sat there, staring at the cup, feeling oddly peaceful. He took a sip. It wasn't the best coffee he had ever had. In fact, it was a little too strong, but it felt different. It felt honest. As he sat there, he listened to the conversations around him. A young man was telling Lena that he had finally found a job. An older woman thanked her for helping carry groceries the other day. A group of teenagers were doing homework and laughing quietly in the corner. This was indeed just a cafe. It was like a small community wrapped inside 4 walls. For a moment, Ethan forgot who he was. He wasn't the man whose every move was on business news, or the man whose assistants handled everything for him. He was just a quiet stranger in a warm little place that smelled of cinnamon and coffee beans. He looked at Lena again and wondered what kind of person she was, what kept her so kind in a world that seemed to reward the opposite. There was a tiredness in her eyes, he noticed, but it was hidden behind her cheerful tone. She was smiling for everyone, even when she looked like she hadn't slept well. Ethan stayed longer than he planned to. When he finally got up to leave, Lena waved and said, "Hope to see you again, stranger." He smiled. "You might." Outside, as he walked back toward his car, the noise of the city felt louder than usual. His phone buzzed with messages from his team, meetings, financial reports, and reminders. He didn't open any of them. Instead, he found himself turning back toward the cafe for one last look. Through the window, he could see Lena laughing with a customer. Wiping her hands on her apron, something inside him shifted that day. He didn't know exactly what, but he knew he wanted to come back. Not as the owner checking on his property, but as Eli, the quiet man who just liked the coffee. As he drove away, he thought about the words she had said again. "We don't serve customers, we serve people." It sounded simple, but it meant everything. It was the kind of truth money couldn't buy, the kind of warmth that no business plan could create. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the billionaire who had everything, felt like he had just discovered something real. The next morning, his assistant called to remind him about a meeting with investors. He listened quietly and then said, "Push it back a few hours. I have somewhere I need to be first." And when he hung up, he knew exactly where he was going. Ethan went back to the cafe the next morning, dressed the same Waitress jeans, a hoodie, and those glasses that made him look like any other tired man trying to wake up with coffee. The same warm smell of roasted beans and baked muffins filled the air as he pushed open the door. It felt strangely comforting, like walking into a place that already knew his name. Lena was behind the counter again, humming softly as she wiped the tables. When she noticed him, her face lit up. "You came back, stranger," she said with a teasing smile. "Guess we didn't scare you off after all?" Ethan smiled back, trying not to sound awkward. "I told you I might come again." "You make good coffee," Lena laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "Same order." He nodded, and she went to make his drink. While he waited, he looked around more carefully. Now that he wasn't nervous about being recognized, he noticed things he hadn't before, the old clock that ticked a little too loudly, the chalkboard with kind notes from customers, and the tip jar labeled Kindness Fund. Every part of the cafe told a story. When Lena came back with his coffee, she sat it down gently and said, "You look like someone who thinks too much." Ethan chuckled. "Maybe I do." She tilted her head. "Thinking never fixes everything, you know. Sometimes you just have to feel things." That simple sentence hit him again. She had this way of saying things that sounded ordinary but carried real truth. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to him like that, not a business partner, not an assistant, not even a friend. Everyone around him always talked numbers, goals, deadlines. Lena talked about life. Over the next few days, Ethan found excuses to visit more often. He'd bring his laptop and pretend to be working on something, but really he just liked being there. He'd listen to the small talk, the laughter, the sound of spoons clinking in cups. The world outside the cafe moved fast and cold, but inside, time seemed to slow down. Every day, he learned a little more about Lena. She was 26 and had worked at the cafe for almost 3 years. She lived nearby with her younger brother Noah, who was still in high school. Their parents had passed away in a car accident 2 years earlier, and since then, she had taken care of everything: rent, bills, food, school supplies. It wasn't easy, but she never complained. Ethan noticed that even when she was clearly tired, she smiled at everyone. When an old man came in and didn't have enough money for his drink, she quietly paid for it. When a mother came in with a crying baby, she brought a free muffin just to cheer them up. She had this calm strength that Ethan couldn't stop admiring. One afternoon, when the cafe was quiet, Ethan asked her, "Why do you work here? You seem like someone who could do, well, anything else." Lena looked thoughtful for a moment, then said, "Because this place matters. It's not just about coffee. It's about people. When I lost my parents, I felt like everything fell apart. Then one day I came here just to sit down, and the woman who owned the cafe at that time gave me tea and told me to take my time. She didn't even know my name, but that small kindness saved me that day. So now, I try to do the same for others." Ethan didn't say anything for a while. He was thinking about how different their worlds were. He had spent years building an empire, always chasing the next big idea. But he couldn't remember the last time he had done something that simple and kind, just because it mattered. He began staying longer each visit. Sometimes he would help clean tables when it got busy. Lena laughed the first time he tried to carry 3 mugs at once and nearly spilled them all. "You're not bad," she teased, "but don't quit your day job." He smiled, thinking if she only knew what his day job really was. But he didn't tell her. Not yet. Something about keeping his secret made him feel free. For once, people weren't treating him like a billionaire. They were treating him like a person. One evening, when most customers had left, Lena sat down at his table with a cup of tea. "You're always so quiet," she said. "What do you do, really?" Ethan paused for a second. "I do some work in technology." "Freelance stuff." "Freelance?" she asked with a grin. "That sounds mysterious." "Let's just say I'm between projects right now," Lena laughed. "You sound like half the people who come in here." "Everyone's chasing something these days." Her words were light, but they made him think. He was chasing something, though he didn't know what. Success had stopped feeling like success long ago. Maybe he was chasing meaning. Maybe that's why he was sitting in a small cafe, pretending to be someone else. Over the next week, Ethan became a quiet part of the cafe's rhythm. He'd help carry boxes, refill napkin holders, and sometimes fix small things. Once the espresso machine stopped working, and he spent an hour under the counter tinkering with it until it started humming again. Lena clapped her hands when it came back to life. "Eli, you're officially promoted to part-time miracle worker," she said, laughing. He laughed too, but deep down he felt proud. It had been years since he'd done something simple and real like that, helping fix something that actually mattered to people. One day, as they cleaned up after closing time, Lena looked tired. She leaned against the counter and sighed. "I'm just hoping to make enough this month to pay Noah's school fees. He's smart, you know. He wants to study engineering." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "That's great," he said softly. "He's lucky to have you." Lena smiled faintly. "I'm the lucky one. He keeps me going. Some days I feel like giving up, but then I see how hard he studies, and I remind myself why I can't." Ethan wanted to tell her then that she didn't have to worry, that he could help, that he had the power to change everything for her, but he couldn't. If he told her the truth, it would ruin everything. She'd never look at him the same way again, that night when he left the cafe. He sat in his car for a long time, staring at the small building. The lights were turning off one by one inside. For the first time in years, he didn't want to go home to his mansion full of silence. He wanted to stay in that warm, noisy little cafe with the woman who made everyone feel seen. He didn't understand why she mattered to him so much already. Maybe because she represented everything he'd forgotten: kindness without reason, courage without fame, love without conditions. Before he started the car, he took one last look at the handwritten note on the cafe window. It said, "Be kind, because everyone you meet is fighting a battle you can't see." As he drove off into the quiet night, Ethan realized that Lena's battles were real. But what she didn't know was that he was fighting one too, the battle between the man he had become and the man he wanted to be again. Ethan started going to the cafe almost every day. What began as curiosity had turned into something he couldn't explain. He would sit in his usual corner, pretending to type on his laptop, but most of the time, he just watched Lena move around. She had this calm way of handling everything, taking orders, chatting with regulars, joking with kids, even comforting lonely people who just needed someone to listen. The cafe was noisy sometimes, but it never felt chaotic. It felt alive, and Ethan loved being a small part of it. Days turned into weeks, and the strange disguise he wore no longer felt like a mask. He started feeling like Eli more than Ethan Cole, the billionaire. Nobody in the cafe cared who he really was. They liked him for who they thought he was, a quiet man who helped when needed and always smiled politely. He hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. Lena, too, had grown comfortable with him. She would wave when he came in, sometimes saving his favorite corner for him. They talked more often now about books, music, random life stories, and sometimes about dreams they had when they were younger. Ethan found himself opening up, saying things he had never told anyone. He told her how he had once wanted to build something that made people's lives better, not just richer. She listened carefully, nodding, not knowing how close his words were to the truth. One rainy afternoon, the cafe was almost empty. The sound of raindrops hitting the windows filled the room. Lena brought him his coffee and sat down across from him for a few minutes. "You know," she said softly, "rain always makes me think about my mom. She used to say, 'Rain is how the sky cleanses its heart.'" Ethan looked at her, touched by her words. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. She smiled, then sighed. "I miss her. She used to dream big for me. Wanted me to go to college, study business, maybe run my own cafe one day. But after she and Dad passed, I couldn't. I had to take care of Noah. He's my world now." Ethan felt a sting in his chest. He could see how much she had given up, yet she didn't sound bitter. There was strength in her voice, a quiet pride. "You still could," he said. "You're smart and you have heart. Those are the real ingredients for success." Lena laughed gently. "Heart doesn't pay tuition, Eli, but thank you. Maybe one day." She stood up to get back to work, but her words stayed with him long after she walked away. He couldn't stop thinking about how unfair it was someone so talented and good-hearted, struggling to survive while people like him had more money than they could ever spend. For the first time, he felt ashamed of his wealth. Later that week, something unexpected happened. The cafe's power went out during a storm. Most customers had already left, but Ethan and Lena were still inside, trying to save some things from getting soaked through a small leak in the roof. When the lights went completely dark, Lena laughed nervously. "Well, I guess we're stuck here for a bit." Ethan looked around. "Do you have candles?" She nodded and brought out a few from the counter. Soon, the cafe glowed with soft golden light. The rain outside made gentle music against the windows. The whole place felt strangely magical. They sat down with mugs of warm coffee, the flickering candlelight dancing across their faces. "You know," Lena said, smiling, "this actually feels nice." "Peaceful." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, sometimes losing power helps you see things clearer." She tilted her head. "That sounds like something from a movie," he smiled. "Maybe, but it's true." They talked for hours that night. She told him about Noah's dream to build something great one day. Ethan shared stories from his early life of working long nights, of failing before succeeding. He kept his identity hidden, but he spoke honestly. And for once, it didn't feel like lying. At one point, Lena asked, "Do you ever feel like you're meant for something, but you don't know what it is yet?" "All the time," he said quietly. "Maybe the answer isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we build." Her eyes softened. "You really think so?" "I do," he said, and he meant it. When the storm finally ended and the power came back on, the world outside looked washed clean. As they locked up, Lena smiled at him. "Thanks for keeping me company. Most people would have run off the second the lights went out." "I guess I like storms," he said with a grin. She laughed. "You're strange, Eli." That night, as he drove home, he couldn't stop thinking about her laugh, her strength, her quiet hope. He felt something growing inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just admiration. It was care, maybe even love. The next morning, his phone was full of missed calls from his assistant, Clara. When he finally answered, her voice sounded tense. "Mr. Cole, we have a problem. The Maple Street Caf, your company's investment hits, financial losses are increasing. The investors want to close it by the end of the month." "Close it?" "Yes, it's draining resources, and the numbers don't justify keeping it open. They've already scheduled a meeting to discuss the sale." He looked out his window at the gray city skyline. He thought about Lena, about Noah, about the laughter in that little cafe. He imagined the sign coming down, the place turning into another cold, soulless building. The thought made him feel sick. "I'll handle it," he said firmly. Sir? I said, I'll handle it. Don't approve anything until I say so. He hung up, his jaw tight. That evening, when he returned to the cafe, Lena greeted him as usual, smiling like everything was fine. She had no idea what was coming. He watched her serving customers, chatting and laughing, completely unaware that the place she loved so much was about to be taken from her. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he couldn't. Not yet. If she knew who he really was, would she even trust him again? Or would she see him as another rich man who thought he could buy happiness? As he sat there watching her, he realized he was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to the world he knew: money, power, control. The other path was uncertain, but it led to something real. That night, as he walked out into the cold air, he made a quiet promise to himself. He wouldn't let the cafe die. He didn't know how yet, but he would find a way. What he didn't realize was that his decision would soon change everything for Lena, for her brother, and for him. Because saving the cafe wasn't just about saving a business anymore. It was about saving the part of himself he thought he had lost forever. The next week felt heavier than usual for Ethan. Every morning he drove to the cafe, watching the familiar signs sway in the gentle breeze. But now, a shadow hung over the place. The investors had decided that the financial losses were too high, and they planned to sell the building. The thought of the cafe disappearing, of Lena losing her safe place, made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. When he walked in that morning, Lena greeted him with her usual smile, unaware of the storm approaching. Good morning, Eli? The usual? She asked cheerfully. Yes, please, he said, forcing a calm tone. As the day went on, Ethan tried to focus on being a regular customer. He helped refill sugar containers, carried trays, and even fixed a wobbly chair. But his mind kept returning to the looming sale. He watched Lena serve customers, laughing and joking with them, and felt a pang of guilt. How could he let someone so pure, so dedicated, lose the place she loved? By late afternoon, a letter arrived, addressed to Lena. Ethan saw her pick it up and noticed the official-looking envelope. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Ethan's heart raced. Lena's face changed slowly, the smile fading as she read. Her hands shook, and a tear slid down her cheek. It's the notice, she whispered, her voice breaking. The cafe. They're selling it. They said there's no other option. Ethan froze. He wanted to leap across the counter and tell her not to worry. They would fix everything, but he couldn't reveal his identity. Not yet. Not in this vulnerable moment. He watched helplessly as Lena sank onto a stool behind the counter. Hugging herself for comfort, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I can't lose this place, she said quietly. It's more than just coffee or work. It's home. It's where people come to feel safe. It's where I feel like I matter. Ethan wanted to reach out to her, but he stayed silent, knowing that any word from him, any hint that he had the power to save the cafe, would destroy the trust she had in him. He felt a sharp pain in his chest. He had never cared about a place or a person like this before. Over the next few days, Lena struggled to keep smiling for the customers. She didn't talk much about the sale, but Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She worked harder than ever, trying to save the cafe herself. She organized small events, tried promotions, and even worked extra hours, but the reality was unavoidable. The sale would happen unless someone intervened. Ethan started thinking about ways he could help without revealing himself. He made calls, rearranged some finances under fake names, and even contacted a few trusted friends discreetly. Every night he stayed up late, planning, calculating, making sure that when the moment came, he could act quickly. Meanwhile, Lena didn't know she was being helped. She continued her daily routine, wiping tables, serving coffee, and greeting regulars with the same warmth. Ethan watched her one afternoon, wiping a tear from her cheek when a young student thanked her for giving him free pastries. She smiled through her sadness, still putting everyone else first. That was when he realized something important. This cafe wasn't just about the business. It was about her heart, her spirit, and the lives she touched every single day. Then one evening, after the cafe closed and the last customers left, Lena sat alone at a table. Her eyes were red from crying. Ethan approached quietly and placed his hands gently on the edge of the counter. "Hey," he said softly. Lena looked up, startled. "Oh. Hi," she said, trying to smile. Ethan sat across from her. "I saw the letter," he said carefully. I know how much this place means to you." Her voice trembled. "It means everything. I don't know what I'd do if it closed. I don't have anywhere else. This is my life, Eli. This is Noah's safe place too." He nodded, unable to speak. How could he explain that he could save it without breaking the trust they had built? How could he reveal the truth without destroying the bond they had formed over these weeks? They sat in silence for a few moments, the only sound being the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. Ethan wanted to tell her everything, to take away her fear and worry, but he stayed quiet. He needed to plan one that could truly help her without causing more pain that night. Ethan drove home under the quiet streetlights, thinking about Lena and the cafe. He realized that the more time he spent with her, the more he cared. He wasn't just a silent observer anymore. He was emotionally invested in saving not just the building, but her hope and happiness. The following morning, Lena came in with her usual determined smile, trying to appear strong for the customers. Ethan noticed her carrying extra trays, running faster between tables, even laughing a little too loudly to hide the sadness in her eyes. He felt a mix of admiration and heartbreak. She was incredible, so strong and selfless, but he knew she was on the edge of exhaustion. Throughout the day, he kept thinking about the investor's deadline. There were only a few days left before the sale would go through. Every phone call he made, every secret plan he put into motion, carried weight. He had to be careful. One wrong move, and Lena could find out too soon. One wrong word, and the trust they had built could crumble. That night, after the cafe closed, Ethan stayed back, helping her clean up. Lena wiped tables silently, her hands moving mechanically. He didn't speak at first. Finally, he said, "You know, Lena, this place, it's special. I can see why people love it. It's not just the coffee. It's you. It's your heart." Lena looked at him, a small tear forming in her eye. I wish it could stay open. I don't want to lose this. I've given everything I have to keep it alive." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling a surge of emotion. He wanted to promise her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he couldn't, at least not yet. He had to wait until the plan was ready, until he could reveal the truth in a way that wouldn't hurt her. He stayed late that night. After Lena had gone home, reviewing every step he needed to take, he had arranged for the sale to be stopped, debts cleared, and a mysterious donor to cover the cafe's financial troubles. Everything had to happen perfectly. The timing had to be right, or Lena might never trust him again. As he drove home, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement from a light drizzle. Ethan realized that saving this cafe wasn't just about money anymore. It was about something deeper, protecting the place where kindness, hope, and love still existed in a world that often overlooked them. And most importantly, it was about Lena, the young woman who carried so much on her shoulders, yet never let it break her spirit. He didn't know how she would react when she found out, or if she would understand why he had kept his identity a secret. But he knew one thing: he couldn't let her lose this cafe. Not now. Not ever. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Not wealth, not power, but genuine care. For Lena, for the cafe, for the world he realized could still be touched by simple, honest goodness. Weeks passed, and the Maple Street Café began to feel alive again. The small shop buzzed with laughter. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and regulars returned as if nothing had changed. But Lena still had no idea that someone had quietly saved the cafe for her. She thought it was a miracle, or perhaps good luck, and each day she thanked the universe for keeping her safe space alive. Ethan continued to visit, still as Eli, but now he noticed a difference in her demeanor. She was lighter, more relaxed, and her laughter came easier. She didn't know who had intervened, and for a moment, Ethan was content just watching her happiness. He felt proud, knowing that he had played a part, even if it was in secret. One morning, as Lena opened the cafe, a crowd had gathered outside. Curious, she walked to the window and saw a few cameras, reporters, and microphones. Her heart skipped a beat. She hurried to the counter, wiping her hands on her apron, trying to understand what was happening. Before she could even think, a familiar voice spoke over the crowd. "Good morning, everyone." It was Ethan, but not in his hoodie. He was in a crisp suit, standing confidently with a microphone in hand. The cameras focused on him. The reporters asked questions about a new donation to local businesses. Highlighting a particular cafe that had been saved from closure, Lena froze. Her eyes widened and her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She watched as Ethan smiled at the crowd, explaining that the Maple Street Café, known for its community spirit and kindness, had been saved thanks to an anonymous contribution. He spoke passionately about the importance of small businesses, the value of human connection, and how places like this cafe made the world better. Then, with a small nod, he walked toward the cafe door and pushed it open. Lena was still stunned, her hands gripping the counter. He removed his glasses and hoodie, revealing the man she had never suspected, the billionaire who had been quietly observing. "Helping and caring for the cafe for weeks? I know this is a lot to take in," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "I've been coming here as someone else. I wanted to understand this place, to see it through real eyes, not just as an investor or owner." Lena's hands trembled, and she took a step back. You're Ethan Cole?" she whispered. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yes, I own the cafe, and I wanted to make sure it stayed open for you, for Noah, and for everyone who loves this place." For a moment, Lena couldn't speak. Her mind raced. She felt shock, confusion, disbelief, and an overwhelming wave of gratitude. The man she had laughed with, shared stories with, and even trusted as a friend, was the very person who could have changed everything in a way she didn't want. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. Her voice was shaky, filled with emotion. "You saved this place for me." Ethan shook his head gently. "Not just for you. For everyone who comes here, for the community, for the heart of this cafe. But you reminded me why this place matters. Your kindness, your strength, your heart, that's what makes this cafe more than just coffee. That's why it had to survive." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes, and she stepped forward, finally closing the small gap between them. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice thick. "I thought it was luck. I thought maybe someone somewhere just decided to help. But it was you. Ethan reached out and gently touched her hand. "It was me. And I want you to know, Lena, I don't want this to feel like charity. I want this to be real. This cafe is yours as much as it is mine. I want you to have a say in how it runs, in every decision. You've earned that." Lena's chest tightened with a mix of relief and emotion. I don't know what to say. I've never felt anything like this." You've changed everything," Ethan smiled softly. "You've changed me too. I came here looking for a place, but I found something far more important, people who care, and someone who inspires me every day. You've reminded me that life isn't just about success or money. It's about heart, and you have more heart than anyone I've ever met." For a long moment they stood there, the sounds of the cafe quiet except for the hum of the machines and the soft murmur of the remaining customers. Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest, relief, gratitude, and something she couldn't quite name. She realized that the man standing in front of her wasn't just her boss or a benefactor. He was someone who had seen her struggle, her strength, and her spirit, and chose to protect it. Ethan continued, "I want you to stay here, Lena, not just as a manager, but as a partner. I want you to help run this cafe, make decisions, and continue to do the amazing work you've been doing. This place is yours too." Lena blinked back tears, feeling a sense of purpose and recognition she had never felt before. I'd like that. I'd really like that," she said softly. The cameras outside captured the moment, but it felt private, intimate. Ethan and Lena shared a quiet understanding, a bond built over weeks of trust, kindness, and unseen care. For the first time, Lena realized that the stranger she had laughed with, confided in, and admired was the same person who had changed her life. Over the next few days, the cafe thrived more than ever. Customers returned, some even bringing friends, inspired by the story of the cafe's survival. Lena worked closely with Ethan, making decisions, introducing small improvements, and bringing her unique warmth to every interaction. The cafe became a place where people felt valued, seen, and welcomed, just as it had always been. Only stronger, Ethan stayed close, but not overbearing. He let Lena lead, guiding when needed, but always respecting her space and judgment. Slowly, their friendship deepened, filled with mutual respect, admiration, and quiet affection. The bond they had formed in the weeks of secrecy now became open and honest, built on trust and understanding. One afternoon, as the cafe quieted down, Lena looked around at the familiar tables, the smiling customers, and the warm sunlight streaming through the windows. She realized how much this place meant to her, not just as a job, but as a home, a sanctuary, and now a symbol of hope and resilience. Ethan approached and handed her a small stack of papers. "Plans for the future," he said with a grin. "Nothing fancy, but I want you to have them. I want you to help shape this place." Lena smiled, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. "I will," she said firmly. "I promise I'll do my best." He nodded, his eyes soft. "I know you will. And I'll be here too. Not as a stranger, not as a secret observer, but as someone who believes in this cafe and in you." For the first time in a long while, Lena felt completely seen, appreciated, and safe. And Ethan, standing beside her, felt something he had not felt in years. The joy of being part of something real. Something meaningful, something that mattered far more than money or power. Together, they looked around the cafe, and for a moment, everything was perfect. The Maple Street Café was alive, thriving, and full of heart, and so were they. From that day forward, the cafe was more than a place to drink coffee. It was a symbol of kindness, hope, and the extraordinary difference one person could make in another's life. And in the middle of it all, Lena and Ethan found something unexpected. A connection neither of them had anticipated, but both knew would change their lives forever.